18-year-old Maya had always defined herself by her independent skiing down snowy mountainsides, sprinting across soccer fields, dancing freely with friends. Then a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her world narrowed to the confines of a wheelchair and the echoes of what she'd lost. Desperate to reclaim hope, she summoned the courage to visit the local animal shelter, where abandoned dogs huddled behind wire fences, their eyes reflecting stories of neglect and fear. Neither Maya nor the anxious dog she would soon meet could fathom the bond that would form in that cramped room, an unspoken promise that together, they might discover new strength and, in a moment of breathtaking compassion, transform to broken lives forever. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Maya folded her fingers around the armrest of her wheelchair and inhaled the crisp morning air as she rolled slowly down the sidewalk toward the small animal shelter at the edge of town. Only weeks had passed since the accident that changed everything. Her world had collapsed into routines of physical therapy, doctor appointments, and nights spent staring at the ceiling as the sterile white glow of hospital lights haunted her memories. But on this bright spring morning, her cheeks warmed by pale sunlight, she felt a stirring of determination she hadn't known since she woke from the coma. She would reclaim her life by stepping into unfamiliar territory, seeking solace in the innocent companionship of a dog in need. Inside the shelter's foyer, the hum of fluorescent bulbs barely masked the distant chorus of barking, whimpering, and nails scraping concrete. Volunteers shifted between kennels, offering bowls of water and gentle pats to nervous animals. The walls were lined with photographs of success stories, tail-wagging dogs with proud families, and assurances that hope could flourish here. Maya's eyes traced each smiling face as she wheeled past, her own heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and fear. She had never owned a dog. Growing up in her busy household, pets had been a luxury her parents couldn't afford. Now, with freedom of movement and speech partially restored but her sense of identity shattered, she wondered if forging a connection with an animal scarred by its own trauma might spark a new beginning for both of them. As she approached the volunteer desk, a young woman in a green vest looked up and offered a tentative smile. "Hi there. Are you here to meet a particular dog, or just browsing?" Maya cleared her throat and managed a quiet, steady voice. "I'd like to meet one of the dogs available for adoption. I'm hoping to find, well, a friend." The volunteer's eyes softened as she reached beneath the desk and withdrew a clipboard. "Perfect. I'll need you to fill out some basic info, consent forms, the usual. Once that's done, we can bring a few of our more gentle dogs to the fenced meet-and-greet area." Maya nodded and signed her name on the dotted line, her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. She glanced out the window at the rows of outdoor runs, where bigger dogs paced anxiously, tails rigid with tension. One in particular caught her eye, a brindle-coated pit bull mix with eyes as dark as night. His body low to the ground, back legs trembling. A bright bandage around his torso suggested a recent injury. The volunteer noticed her gaze and offered a whisper. "That's Echo. He came in 3 weeks ago, abused, chained outside, starved. He's making progress, but he's still very wary of people." Maya's chest tightened. She knew fear and suspicion well. "I think I'd like to meet him," she whispered back. Her finger hovered over her wheelchair's joystick. A gesture of resolve, the volunteer guided Maya to the back courtyard, where a small chain-link enclosure awaited. Inside, a hesitant figure skulked in the corner, head low and ears pinned back. Echo's breath came in short, ragged gasps. Maya approached the fence gingerly, her wheelchair wheels crunching on loose gravel. She leaned forward, her gloved hand flattening against the chain links. "Hey buddy," she murmured, voice gentle. Silence met her words. For a long moment, she thought he might bolt. But then Echo lifted his head, nostrils flaring, and took a careful step forward. Maya's heart squeezed at the sight of him, ribs faintly visible beneath his dull coat, scars crisscrossing his hindquarters. She remembered the night of her accident, the frantic screech of tires, and the helplessness as pain coursed through her body. Somehow, in Echo's cautious walk, she found a mirror of her own fractured spirit. Slowly, she extended her hand through the wire, palm up, fingers trembling slightly. Echo inched closer, his gaze fixed on her face. He sniffed her knuckles, and Maya felt a small spark of connection ignite between them. Behind her, the volunteer stayed silent, letting the moment unfold. Maya thought of all the times she had felt unseen, left behind by friends who couldn't comprehend her new limitations. She thought of Echo's past, voiceless and confined by cruelty, and recognized an unspoken kinship. In that gravel courtyard, Two wounded souls hovered at the threshold of trust, each begging the question, could someone who had been broken find the strength to love again? Maya closed her eyes and whispered, "You're safe now." Echo's warm snort brushed her hand. She opened her eyes to meet his gaze clear, searching, alive. A glimmer of hope shimmered between them, fragile but unmistakable. In that heartbeat, the world around them, the barking chorus, the distant traffic, the sterile shelter walls faded away. Two hearts, one human and one canine, leaned into the promise of renewal. As the volunteer quietly unlatched the gate and stepped aside, Maya and Echo remained locked in that moment of fragile trust. She guided her wheelchair inside the enclosure, maintaining a respectful distance. Echo's ears pricked, tail stirring ever so slightly. The volunteer offered a discreet nod before slipping back beyond the fence, granting them privacy. Maya inhaled the scent of earth and fur, each breath anchoring her to this new purpose, to nurture Echo's wounded spirit as he might, in turn, restore her own. In the days to come, this introduction would mark the beginning of a journey neither could yet fully imagine, a journey through fear, pain, and loss toward a bond forged in empathy and compassion. For now, all that mattered was the trust born in a single trembling sniff, and the quiet understanding that healing often takes root in the most unexpected meetings. Two souls battered by fate, a paralyzed teen and an abused dog, stand at the precipice of trust, one hesitant sniff away from a bond that could redefine hope and ignite healing. Maya returned to the shelter 2 days after her first tentative meeting with Echo, the memory of his cautious sniff still vivid in her mind. As she maneuvered her wheelchair through the same courtyard gate, dawn's pale light painted long shadows across the gravel, and the air smelled of damp earth and hope. She paused to press one hand to the chain-link fence where Echo had first reached toward her. That single moment of connection had lodged itself in her thoughts, fueling an urge to understand both his world and her own new reality more deeply. Today, however, she had resolved not merely to visit Echo but to immerse herself in the fuller rhythm of shelter life, to learn its routines, meet the people who cared for these animals day in and day out, and confront any lingering fears she carried about forming a bond. Inside the main building, volunteers bustled with morning chores. Fresh bedding was carried to indoor kennels. Bowls were washed and refilled. Veterinarians consulted with staff over paperwork, discussing vaccination schedules and health checks. The gentle clatter of kennel doors opening and closing mingled with soft whimpers and gentle whines of dogs eager for their daily routines. To Maya, who was accustomed to the sterile hum of hospital corridors and the clinical precision of medical staff, the shelter felt alive, an ecosystem of give and take, vulnerability and care. As she navigated toward the volunteer desk, the shelter coordinator, Marta, looked up and greeted her with a warm, professional smile. "Maya, welcome back," Marta said, extending a clipboard. "I know you've already met Echo, but today, I thought you might like to start by shadowing one of our volunteers. It's the best way to see how everything works in to get comfortable with all our residents before you spend more time with him." Maya nodded, reflecting on the volunteer application she had filled out earlier. The forms had asked about her living situation, her experience with animals, and her availability. It felt strange to write novice under experience, but eager under commitment. Yet that eagerness, she reminded herself, was the point. "I'd like that," she replied softly. Marta paired Maya with James, a volunteer whose calm voice and gentle manner had already endeared him to many of the shelter's more anxious dogs. He knelt beside her wheelchair. "Ready?" he asked, offering to guide her to the indoor play yards. Maya gripped his outstretched hand and followed as he rolled open the heavy door. Inside, clusters of dogs, some rescues, some owner surrenders, played under the watchful eyes of volunteers. A pair of greyhounds stretched luxuriously by a sunlit window. A wiry terrier mix darted among them, barking with delight. Each dog's tail wagged differently, tentative swishes, hopeful thumps, exuberant whirls. Maya realized she was studying not just the dogs' behaviors but their personalities, each a mirror of resilience, longing, and the unspoken plea for understanding. James showed her how to greet the dogs properly, extending a palm for sniffing, avoiding direct eye contact that might threaten shy animals, speaking in low, soothing tones. Maya practiced under his supervision, her heart racing each time a curious snout approached. She was both exhilarated and anxious. Exhilarated because every successful greeting felt like a minor victory over her own doubt. Anxious because the risk of being rejected or even nipped by a frightened dog loomed in every encounter. Yet no one laughed at her hesitance. Instead, volunteers offered encouraging words and reassurances that trust, once broken, often returned, gradually if at all with patience and consistency. Over the next hour, Maya cleaned up water bowls, replenished chew toys, and helped scrub down small play areas. Simple tasks, but each offered her insights into the day-to-day operations that sustained the shelter. She learned how staff categorized dogs by temperament: handlers, cuddlers, and solo, each requiring unique approaches. She discovered that some dogs, like Luna gentle Malamute, mixed with soulful eyes on companionship, while others, like Tanka, broad-shouldered bulldog with a permanent scowl, prefer to observe from a distance. Still other dogs needed specialized routines. Kiki, the deaf husky, responded best to sign language and hand signals. Buster, an elderly lab, moved slowly and required extra padding in his bed to ease arthritis pain. Every detail mattered, and each dog, despite past traumas of abandonment or abuse, had carved out a little niche in the shelter's ecosystem. As midday approached, James led Maya to the small on-site clinic, where a veterinarian, Dr. Singh, conducted routine checkups. Maya watched as Dr. Singh listened to a puppy's chest with a stethoscope and gently examined a senior dog's joints. She saw the weight of responsibility in the doctor's eyes. These were lives in limbo, depending on every decision made here. Dr. Singh noticed Maya's attentive gaze and invited her to assist in simple tasks, holding a treat to distract a nervous canine or calming a dog mid-examination with a kind word. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she held the treat. The dog's ears rose, and its dark eyes fixed on her. When she broke a small piece of kibble and offered it to the patient, he swallowed eagerly and wagged his tail. Maya's voice caught in her throat, but she managed a smile. Her ability to soothe another living creature, so different from her own ordeal, kindled a profound sense of purpose. Between the clinic and the play yards, Maya encountered the shelter's administrative side, donation bins overflowing with collars, blankets, and leashes, bulletin boards plastered with flyers for community adoption events, spreadsheets tracking each dog's intake date, medical history, and potential adoptive families. She chatted with volunteers organizing a Paws for a Cause fundraiser, outdoor festival where families could meet dogs and puppies in hopes of adoption. They discussed marketing strategies, social media posts featuring adoption success stories, local pet-friendly business partnerships, and even a volunteer-based photography team tasked with capturing each dog's personality in a single frame. Maya found herself brainstorming ideas. Could she craft a short, emotional narrative about Echo's journey to share online? The thought of using her own story to help a dog's adoption stirred her imagination. Throughout the morning, Maya's internal monologue wove between her past and present, memories of hospital beds and physical therapists urging her to push harder. Flashbacks of her accident and the rush of pain contrasted with the lively chaos of barking dogs and the steady kindness of shelter staff. She contemplated her fears: fear of getting attached, fear of facing abandonment again if a dog was adopted out, or, worse, returned. She questioned whether she could invest emotional energy into a bond that so often ended in heartbreak. Yet each dog she met offered a counterpoint: joy at a belly rub from an elderly lab cradled in her lap, relief in a shy terrier's first tentative lick, the pride in mentoring a new volunteer who had never held a leash before. She felt herself shifting from a victim of circumstance to an active participant in these animals' lives. As the volunteer shift wound down and staff prepared lunch for the afternoon, Marta reappeared to thank Maya for her help. "You've done excellent work today," she said, handing Maya a fresh bottle of water. "How are you feeling?" Maya paused, scanning the courtyard where Echo lay in the sun, his brindle coat gleaming faintly. She didn't yet know if she was ready to approach him again, but she no longer felt the same hesitation that had gripped her on her first visit. Instead, she sensed a growing confidence seated by understanding and shared routine. "I feel connected," she replied. "Like I'm part of something bigger than my own struggles." Marta nodded, her expression both professional and deeply compassionate. "That's exactly why we encourage volunteers to spend time with all our dogs," she said. "The more you understand their stories, the more meaningful your bond will be when you meet the one who needs you the most." Maya rolled toward the fence where Echo rested, his head lifting as she approached. She slowed, allowing him space, and offered a gentle greeting as she had learned that morning. Echo's response, a soft wag of his tail, felt like vindication of her newfound courage. She knew that the day's experiences, from scrubbing bowls to observing medical care, had prepared her for this moment. Each task, no matter how small, had woven a thread of empathy and knowledge that tied her fate ever closer to Echo's. In the next meeting, she would be more than an outsider hoping for a connection. She would be an informed companion, offering patience, compassion, and unwavering presence. Maya exhaled slowly and whispered, ready for another round. Echo. He stood and padded toward her wheels, his eyes bright with curiosity. And in that shared anticipation lay the promise of their journey ahead. A journey that neither of them would traverse alone. A paralyzed teen immerses herself in the shelter's rhythm facing fears, forging empathy through every chore and the brink of deepening a fragile bond that could heal them both. As Maya wheeled into the courtyard that bright afternoon, the hum of the shelter seemed to welcome her back. The sunlight slanted through tall fences, casting golden shafts across gravel and grass. She paused at the entrance, inhaling the mingled scents of earth, straw, and canine musk. This sanctuary held stories of abandonment and hope in every breath. Echo lay near the far corner, head low, back legs curled beneath him. His brindle coat rippled with tension as volunteers passed by, calling out his name and offering treats. He turned away. Today, Maya resolved. She would step beyond cautious glances and formal introductions. She would bridge the fragile gap between them. She adjusted her wheelchair to position herself several feet from him, just beyond his threshold of unease. In her lap rested a soft fleece blanket she'd brought from home, infused with her own scent, lavender, clean laundry, faint undertones of her favorite vanilla shampoo. Gently, she pulled the blanket toward her and draped it over the fence, letting one corner brush against Echo's paw. His ears flicked upward, his amber eyes narrowed with suspicion. Maya offered a low, soothing word. Hey, Echo. It's Mom. Her voice trembled only slightly. She drew on the calm confidence she'd cultivated in her second visit, when scrubbing bowls and learning dog language had anchored her in purpose. Echo shivered as he sniffed the blanket. The fabric was foreign yet strangely inviting, a tether reaching between two wounded souls. Maya extended one hand through the chain link, palm up, fingers relaxed. A moment later, Echo rose and padded forward, each step measured, as if balancing the weight of his past against the promise of this moment. His breathing was shallow, sweat beaded between his eyes. Maya remained still, her heart pounding in tandem with his cautious advance. When his nose finally touched her skin, she inhaled his bristly fur and tasted the faint tang of fear. You're safe, she whispered, her voice a sanctified vow. Volunteers watched respectfully from a distance, ensuring privacy but ready to intervene if needed. Maya could feel their eyes, but she shut them out, directing all her attention to Echo's slow, tremulous breaths. Memories surfaced unbidden, the screech of brakes before her accident, the hollow silence that followed, the relentless ache in her legs. In Echo's tentative sniff she saw her own journey of relearning trust in herself and in a world that could hurt as easily as heal. She closed her eyes as he lifted his head, tail giving a hesitant, half-hearted wag. A spark of triumph flickered within her chest, the first real thaw in the ice between them. Without breaking eye contact, Maya reached for the fleece on her lap and tore off a small piece, offering it to Echo like a peace offering. He swallowed it whole and stared at her with eyes that seemed to search for deception. When he realized no trap awaited, his tail twitched more fully. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes but blinked them back, determined to project steadiness. Carefully, she crumpled the blanket in her palm and let it drop at Echo's feet. He sniffed at the pile, and then, as if emboldened by her gesture, nudged it closer to her hand. She gripped the fabric and tugged gently, looping it over the fence. It lay across her lap like a shared promise, encouraged. Maya slowly wheeled forward, reducing the distance between them by inches. Echo's posture stiffened, but he did not retreat. Instead, he turned sideways and brushed his flank against the chain, sending flecks of dust into the sunlight. Maya exhaled, relief flooding her. She whispered, "Good boy," soft enough only for him to hear. A tremor ran through Echo's bodia, flicker of muscle shifting under skin. A ripple of anxiety transforming into cautious acceptance. For the first time, Maya glimpsed the dog beyond his trauma, a being yearning to connect. If only someone offered a lifeline. She reached out and scratched gently behind his ear through the wire. Echo leaned toward the touch, closing his eyes, as if savoring a memory from before his suffering began. Maya's mind drifted to a photograph she'd seen on the wall of the shelter foyer. Echo as a puppy, bright-eyed and playful. She imagined the day he'd been chained out in the elements, the slow erosion of trust as neglect hardened his spirit. Now, here he was, tentatively reclaiming a fragment of joy in a stranger's touch. Tears slipped down Maya's cheeks as she realized the enormity of this fragile encounter, a paralyzed teen, and an abused dog. Discovering that empathy could cross any divide, Echo stirred and sat back on his haunches. Observing Maya with a respectful distance, she smiled and let her hand fall to her lap, acknowledging the pause in their dance. In that quiet space, she felt a current of mutual respect, neither rushing, neither expecting miracles overnight, both honoring the slow arc of healing. Volunteers observed from the edges, their hopeful expressions reflecting the breakthrough they recognized was unfolding. But for Maya and Echo, the world had shrunk to the span of a few feet of gravel, two hearts in tentative synchrony. After several minutes, Maya reached into a treat pouch and pulled out a single piece of dehydrated chicken, Echo's favorite. She'd learned from Marta. Holding it flat in her palm, she extended it inch by inch. Echo's gaze flicked to the treat, then back to Maya. He lowered his head and snatched the morsel gently between his teeth. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The reward of his trust, as small as a single bite, felt like a coronation. She whispered, "That was brave," and the words echoed within her as much as they soothed him. Emboldened, Echo stood and circled Maya's wheelchair, sniffing the wheels and her boots. His tail, once a rigid question mark, now curved with curiosity. Maya traced its movement with her eyes, marveling at how a simple wag could embody so much possibility. In that moment, Echo was no longer the fearful dog huddling in a corner. He was a companion embarking on a shared journey. Maya felt a surge of pride and protective instinct entwined. She knew the path ahead would hold setbacks, flashbacks triggered by sudden noises. Bouts of pain that would test her resolve, but here and now. They had forged a pact of trust. Marta approached quietly and pressed a small bell in her hand. As volunteers re-entered the courtyard, Maya lifted her gaze from Echo and invited them closer. Each volunteer offered smiles and whispered words of congratulations, understanding that this first encounter was the cornerstone of everything to come. Maya took a final glance at Echo, his head bowed in quiet contentment, realized this moment would be seared into her memory forever. They had begun the delicate alchemy of transforming trauma into hope, and though neither could see the full horizon of their journey yet, in Echo's soft, measured steps and Maya's steadfast presence lay the promise of redemption for two souls who'd known only pain. In a sunlit courtyard, a paralyzed teen and an abused dog shatter walls of fear through a single touch, igniting a bond that hints at the healing power of mutual trust. Inside the fenced courtyard, a silence settled between Maya and Echo that transcended the clamor of barking calls and clinking leashes, a silence steeped in unspoken understanding. Maya's mind drifted into the corridors of her own trauma, where echoes of pain resided like specters. She remembered the sudden jolt of the collision, the world tilting as metal crumpled, and the searing burst of pain that followed. A sensation so overwhelming it became her new baseline of existence. In her wheelchair now, she inhabited a body, half familiar, half alien, each movement a reminder of what she could no longer do. Yet as she watched Echo's ears flick and his ribs rise and fall in time with his cautious sniffing, she sensed that in his own body, pain had etched a different story, one of betrayal by those meant to protect him. Their wounds were not identical, but they resonated along the same frequency of unease and longing for safety. Maya's internal monologue drifted between past and present. She thought of her pre-accident, life competitive swims through clear lake water. The exhilarating rush of forward momentum under her own power, and contrasted it with her current reality, where every inch of motion came at the cost of effort and adaptation. Yet in this courtyard, her wheelchair transformed from a symbol of limitation into a vessel of new possibility. Her arms, once take for granted instruments of daily tasks, now bore the strength to connect with a being who understood vulnerability. She traced the lines of Echo's scarred coat, as if reading a map of his history, each jagged mark a chapter of suffering, each cautious wag of his tail an uncertain question. "Can I trust you?" Her heart answered silently, "I know what it means to be broken. I won't abandon you." Echo's own interior world was equally tumultuous. In his earliest memories, he recalled the warmth of a family home, laughter around the dinner table, and gentle hands that scratched behind his ears. Then came the night when the tether that held him to that comfort became a chain. Cold metal bit into his neck, and neglect grew like frost over his spirit, each abandoned night chipping away at his belief in kindness. He learned to flinch at sudden movements, to cower when hands approached, to constrict his world to the small perimeter of his tiny enclosure. Yet when he saw Maya at the fence, her eyes calm, her posture non-threatening, something stirred within him a glimmer of the dog he once was, before cruelty had taken root, a flicker of memory, a swimming pool's cool embrace, the joyous splash as he swam alongside a laughing child. That memory, distant yet vivid, steeled his resolve to risk trust again. As Maya extended her hand through the mesh of galvanized steel, she felt a tremor run through her fingertips, an echo of her own fractured nerves attempting to forge new pathways. Her breathing fell into a rhythm of slow inhales and exhales, a deliberate mimicry of the deep breathing exercises she had learned during physical therapy. With each breath, she offered a mental reassurance. Be still, be patient, be present. She opened herself to the present moment, allowing memories to rise but refusing to be pulled under their weight. In this stillness, she discovered an unexpected kinship with Echo, whose muscles gradually unwound from their coiled tension, whose eyes softened from wary suspicion to tentative curiosity. Echo's amber eyes held layers of defensive calculation. He noted the faint scent of antiseptic and shampoo clinging to Maya's clothing, a mixture reminiscent of hospital corridors and fresh linens. His nose twitched as he discerned the underlying scent of her calm acceptance, a pheromonal signal he instinctively recognized as non-aggressive, yet his heart thundered with the fear that kindness might be a prelude to pain. Each step he took toward Maya represented a negotiation between hope and dread. He longed for relief from solitude yet feared that any connection would be fleeting or false. But in Maya's steady gaze, he sensed a promise untainted by ulterior motives, a promise to meet him in his vulnerability rather than exploit it. Maya's mind flickered to the shelter coordinator's words. Each dog carries its own story, and healing often comes in the shape of small, steady gestures. She recalled scrubbing water bowls with James, witnessing Dr. Singh coax a fearful hound into relaxation with quiet words and gentle touches, observing volunteers mirror each dog's pace instead of imposing their own. Today, she embodied that principle. She let Echo define the limits of their interaction, stepping forward only when he invited her presence. Her psychological struggle mirrored the dog's, the drive to move forward tempered by the instinct to avoid fresh wounds. But as she watched Echo settle on his haunches, tail sweeping the gravel in a slow, deliberate wag, she felt the first stirrings of transformation in herself, the willingness to risk vulnerability once more. Echo's body language shifted imperceptibly. His paws, once rigid with fear, bent at the joint. He lowered his head and nudged Maya's blanket looped over the fence, a gesture of fragile trust. In that motion, Maya heard a silent plea. Remain. She responded with a soft coo. I'm here. No words, no grand gestures. Just the delicate balance of presence and patience. In her mind, she contrasted this gentle communion with the clinical sterility of her rehabilitation sessions, where progress took the form of measured exercises and impersonal praise. Here, in the muddy courtyard, progress manifested in the slow relaxation of muscles, the softening of wary eyes, and the mutual recognition of shared scars as they lingered in that interstitial space. Both mind and body recalibrating. A flash of insight illuminated Maya's thoughts. True healing transcends the physical restoration of capabilities. It demands an emotional reckoning with loss, fear, and the longing for connection. She thought of the hole in her soul left by the abrupt severance of her former self, and she felt the stirrings of mending as Echo pressed his side against the chain fence, inviting her touch. Her fingers traced the contours of his ribs, careful not to press too hard, mindful that even kindness can bruise if rendered without sensitivity. Echo's panting slowed to a lullaby rhythm, each breath a testament to the fragile resilience coursing through his battered body. Echo's internal monologue mirrored her revelations. As Maya's hand grazed his flank, he accessed a dormant reservoir of hope he had sworn never to tap again. He envisioned a future where fear did not dictate. Every interaction, a future where steps toward trust, no matter how small, blossomed into profound companionship. In that moment, he ceased to be merely a haunted survivor. He became an active agent in his own healing story, choosing to lean into the possibility of kindness rather than recoil. His heart, long barricaded behind broken trust, quivered with anticipation. What if I dare believe again? Maya's psychological landscape shifted as she embraced her role, not as a wounded bystander but as a co-creator of Echo's new narrative. She realized that her recovery was not solely a personal journey of regaining strength. It was intertwined with Echo's path to reclaiming dignity and joy. Her confidence swelled as she recognized that her physical limitations did not disqualify her from offering profound empathy. Rather, They endowed her with a unique perspective on fragility and perseverance. She sensed an emergence of self-worth unlinked from athletic achievement. Vanessa, worth born of compassionate presence and emotional attunement, and the hush that now enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant clink of bowls and the soft rustle of wind through chain links. Maya and Echo stood at the threshold of a shared metamorphosis. Two wounded souls, once defined by injury and mistrust, had uncovered in each other the seeds of renewal. Maya's breath, steady and purposeful, mirrored Echo's, now slow and measured rather than rapid with fear. The next morning dawned, cool and clear, and Maya felt a flutter of anticipation as she wheeled back into the courtyard. Echo was the first to notice her, lifting his head at the low hum of her wheelchair's motor. His coat, lean and brindle, caught the sun's early rays, and for a moment, Maya saw a flash of the dog he might have been before hardship carved its lines into his frame. Today, she carried no blanket or treat, only the soft murmur of her voice and an open heart. As she positioned herself near the fence, Echo rose and tentatively approached, tail lifting in a cautious arc. Maya offered a gentle smile and let her hand fall to her side, a deliberate gesture of vulnerability. Echo slowed his pace, his paws stirring dust, and then paused, as if weighing whether to trust this human presence again. Without breaking eye contact, Maya began speaking in her quiet, even tone. "Good morning, my friend. It's just us here." She inhaled deeply, drawing on the calm steadiness she had cultivated over their previous meetings. Echo's breathing shifted, his body language softening. He lowered his head and nudged the fence, as though inviting Maya to cross the boundary. Between them, emboldened, she eased forward, careful not to startle him, and rested her gloved hand on the top rail of the fence. Echo's ears twitched, his eyes fixed on her palm. Maya closed her eyes for a heartbeat, recalling the sharp sting of her accident's aftermath, the shock of immobility, the frustration at every stalled movement. Yet here, in this moment of tentative peace, her wheelchair was not a symbol of loss, but a vessel guiding her closer to an unexpected companion. Echo inched forward, one paw at a time, and lifted his muzzle over the fence. Maya extended her hand, fingers outstretched, as if offering him a bridge. His wet nose met her fingertips, sending a tremor through her arm that felt like electricity. She suppressed the urge to recoil and steadied her breathing, matching his measured inhales. The contact, so delicate and fleeting, resonated in the space between them. Maya's internal voice whispered, "This is more than a meeting, it's a promise." Echo lingered, nose pressed against her glove, as if anchoring himself in the certainty of her presence. For a moment, shelter sounds the distant clang of bowls. The murmur of volunteers faded to a gentle hum, and all that remained was two kindred spirits poised on the brink of something profound. Maya's heart swelled with relief and joy as Echo finally leaned fully into her touch, brushing his cheek against the chain link. She felt the coarse texture of his fur under her palm, the subtle quiver of his muscles relaxing as tension drained away. Her own shoulders, usually tense with the weight of her physical limitations, softened in response. A single tear traced down her cheek, but she tucked it away with a gentle blink. This moment of mutual surrender, a dog's willingness to trust in a teen's ability to offer unconditional acceptance, felt like a doorway into hope. Maya traced a slow arc behind Echo's ear, her hand moving with deliberate care. Echo closed his eyes, a low sigh escaping his throat, as though exhaling months of fear in one unguarded breath. When she withdrew her hand, Maya did so slowly, reluctant to end the connection. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a soft plush toy she'd brought that morning. It was a small bear, worn at the seams, a relic of childhood comfort she now offered to Echo as a sign of friendship. She dropped the toy at the fence's base and stepped back, allowing space for Echo to make the next move. His eyes flicked to the bear, then back to Maya. After a tense beat, he nosed the toy gently and nudged it toward her wheels, as if presenting her with a gift in return. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She reached down to stroke his flank, murmuring, "Thank you." Echo leaned into her, tail wagging in a slow, contented rhythm. Volunteers gathered at the courtyard's periphery, watching the scene with quiet reverence. They knew this breakthrough was rare, a dog's first real comfort in human presence, unfolding not through treats or commands but through shared vulnerability. For Maya, the act of offering herself, her true self, scarred but earnest, had become a catalyst for Echo's tentative joy. She realized that in this small oasis of calm, both of them had found a reprieve from their respective struggles. Echo's body, once coiled in fear, relaxed. Maya's mind, often haunted by frustration and grief, quieted. Together, they had carved out a space of temporary relief. A gentle oasis amid the desert of trauma. As the morning light deepened, Maya wheeled alongside the fence, her hand brushing against Echo's flank through the mesh. He matched her pace, his steps synchronized with her wheels. Though still fenced apart, they moved as one entity, a human and a dog bound by the fragile certainty of trust. In that shared motion, Maya felt a surge of empowerment. She could direct her wheelchair, navigate obstacles, and extend care beyond her own pain. Echo, in turn, could venture into the world of human kindness without fear of betrayal. The courtyard, typically a threshold of precaution, transformed into a space of possibility, a living testament to the healing power of presence. Before leaving, Maya whispered, "I'll see you tomorrow." Echo paused, head tilted as if comprehending every word. He nudged the plush bear again and settled beside it, gazing at Maya with a soft intensity. She pressed her palm to her chest in silent gratitude and began to wheel away, each turn of the wheel infused with newfound purpose. As she passed the volunteer at the gate, the volunteer offered a congratulatory nod. Maya returned the gesture, her heart light with the knowledge that their bond had taken its first real step forward in the lull between departure and the next meeting. Maya reflected on the alchemy of this encounter. Trust forged not through grandeur but through simple acts of reciprocity, touch, attention, and respect. She felt her own spirit buoyed by Echo's tentative joy. A reminder that temporary relief can blossom into lasting resilience when two wounded hearts mirror one another's courage. In a shared moment of calm, a paralyzed teen and an abused dog exchanged gestures of trust, her gentle touch, and his tentative nuzzle hinted a friendship strong enough to transcend pain. The afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky. When Maya returned to the shelter, her muscles already aching from hours of pushing her wheelchair over uneven pavement, a dull throbbing pulsed through her lower back, a reminder of the surgeries that rerouted nerves and the months spent relearning even the simplest movements. Yet the promise of seeing Echo again propelled her forward, each turn of the wheel. Infused with determination, she found him in the courtyard, head lowered, shoulders hunched, as if bracing against an unseen storm. His once tentative wag had faded into a cautious stillness, as though the brief moments of joy they shared had awakened fears he wasn't ready to face again. Maya's heart tightened. She knew that progress was not linear and that every breakthrough risked triggering old wounds. As she rolled nearer, Echo lifted his head and pinned his ears back, nostrils flared. The moment she spoke his name softly, gently he recoiled, snapping the distance between them taut with tension. Maya's lungs constricted, her throat closed over the word she'd scripted in her mind. "Hello, friend." The echo of her own breath felt jagged and sharp. In that instant, she sensed the invisible landmine beneath his feet, a memory of betrayal, pain, or punishment she couldn't yet decipher. Instinctively, she froze, gripping the fence with white-knuckled resolve. Echo's eyes, wide and unblinking, told a story of sudden terror. Maya felt her pulse spike, and for a heartbeat, she questioned whether she had misread every sign of his fragile trust. Behind her, the echoing bark of a larger dog in a nearby run seemed to unravel the thread of safety they'd so carefully woven. Echo's hackles rose, and he bared a flash of teeth before retreating to the far corner of the enclosure. Maya's chest tightened with guilt and self-reproach. She remembered the crash of her own body against cold pavement, the white-hot agony that had shattered her sense of security. In that trauma, even the softest touch had become a potential threat. She realized now that Echo's reaction mirrored the darkest edges of her own interior world. A sudden reminder that past abuses could resurface without warning, rendering each step forward precarious. Maya exhaled slowly, forcing her racing thoughts into a calm rhythm. She reminded herself of the training she'd received never to approach a fearful dog directly after a scare, to give space and time instead. So she eased back, positioning her wheelchair several feet away, her voice lowering to a murmur. "I'm here, Echo. I haven't gone anywhere." She let the words hang in the heavy air between them. Her mind replayed the instructions Marta had shared. Watch for signals of self-soothing nose licking, yawning, turning away, and allow the dog to choose when to re-engage. Maya's hands trembled as she tucked them into her lap, and she closed her eyes for a moment to center herself. When she opened them again, she saw Echo pacing the edge of his run, eyes darting with indecision. A sudden clangor dropped metal bowl from the shelter kitchen, sent Echo into a frenzy. He bolted toward the gate, body quivering, and skidded to a halt, as though colliding with an invisible wall of terror. Maya felt a pang of helplessness. She had no means to chase away that clatter or reassure him with physical proximity. In her mind, she heard the voices of medical professionals urging her to push through pain barriers. But here, she faced a different barrier, the echo of cruelty in Echo's heart that her own fragility could neither erase nor replace. The more she observed his frantic pacing, the more acute her own memories became flashes of screaming tires, the harsh glare of headlights, the helpless weight of paralysis stealing her freedom. Both of them, she realized, were circumnavigating prisons of fear. Summoning her courage, Maya allowed the memory to surface fully, not to drown in it but to honor it. She thought of the night she first sat up in bed, gasping for breath, terrified to move, lest agony surged through her limbs. She leaned back in her wheelchair and closed her eyes, breathing in a slow count of 4. With each exhale, she pictured that younger version of herself crumpled in pain, and she spoke to her softly. "You survived. You are safe now." Turning her focus outward, she spoke to Echo again, her tone layered with unwavering calm. "It's okay. You're okay." The tremor in her voice betrayed her vulnerability. Yet she trusted that authenticity could bridge the gap between them. Minutes passed in silence as Echo's rapid panting gradually slowed. He turned away from the fence and swooped in a tight circle, a sign that he was self-regulating his anxiety. Maya watched the circular path of his legs and recalled the helicopter spins she once performed on the soccer field, moments of pure, non-verbal joy. Now, Echo wove his own circular dance of reclamation, spinning away the shards of fear. Encouraged, Maya lifted her hand and extended it through the links. Her palm was steady, though her pulse drummed beneath her skin. Echo paused mid-step, head tilting as if weighing the risk. When his nose finally lowered to her glove, Maya felt a surge of shared triumph that eclipsed the pain in her back and wrists. She offered a single treat, a dried piece of chicken, placing it flat in her palm rather than between her fingers to prevent accidental nips. Echo took it carefully and then retreated to chew it in solitude, ears still flicking with vigilance. Maya watched as he devoured the morsel, her heart pounding in resonance with his still elevated pulse. She realized that progress would come, in fractured moments like this, small acts of nourishment meted out between waves of fear. Her own healing mirrored his temporary reprieves, punctuated by sudden flare-ups of pain or panic. This shared pattern, she thought, was not a curse but a roadmap to understanding the ebbs and flows of trauma, the necessity of patience, and the power of presence. Suddenly, Echo tilted his head and let out a soft, quavering whimper before taking a tentative step toward Maya's wheelchair. The motion was hesitant, as if testing the solidity of her promise. Maya's breath caught. She felt as though she stood on the edge of a precipice, balancing between despair and hope. She responded by placing both hands on the fence and leaning forward until she felt the gentle tug of his nose against her glove. In that instant, the world condensed to a pinpoint of connection, heartbeats synchronizing, breaths aligning. The conflict that had threatened to sever their bond dissolved in the warmth of shared vulnerability. For a fleeting moment, neither pain nor fear held dominion. But as quickly as the calm descended, a new jolt disrupted it. A truck rumbled past the shelter entrance, its engine growling like a herald of chaos. Echo recoiled once more, spinning away and hurling himself against the fence. Maya's chest constricted with fear at the sight of him flung so violently by an unseen force. Her hands gripped the rails as though she could anchor him in safety. She shouted his name, not in panic but in fierce reassurance. "Echo, it's me, Maya." Words were useless against mechanical thunder, but for both of them they became mantras of resilience. Maya felt tears spring, mixing sorrow for his terror with pride for his courage in returning to her. Echo lay panting, muscles quivering, in the corner, eyes shut tight. Maya rolled back to give him space but maintained eye contact, refusing to look away. She leaned into her own pain, recalling how she had confronted the whine of her own metal wheelchair wheels at night, each turn a reminder of loss, and each turn a testament to survival. She spoke again, her voice soft yet unwavering. "You can come back? I'm here." Gradually, Echo stirred, inhaling shakily before raising his head and meeting her gaze. Something ancient and profound passed between them, a tacit acknowledgement that storms would come but that together they could weather them. As twilight crept across the courtyard, volunteers gently ushered other dogs indoors, leaving Maya and Echo in the hush of dusk. Maya reached for the fleece blanket, draped it across her lap, and then looped one end through the fence toward Echo. He sniffed it, his muzzle trembling, and then tentatively dragged it closer, pulling it into his corner. Maya offered a silent smile, honor-bound by the fabric between them. Though the day had tested their trust with fresh waves of conflict, it had also revealed the depth of their resilience. Each flare of fear receded not in erasure but in response to unwavering patience, lesson both had to relearn over and over. A sudden scare shatters fragile calm, thrusting a paralyzed teen and an abused dog into renewed fear, but, through patient presence and shared courage, they edge ever closer to mutual trust. The next morning, Maya arrived at the shelter with a quiet resolve. Her arms ached from the previous day's exertion, push of the wheelchair wheels, a testament to her growing strength, but today, she felt a deeper urgency pulsing in her chest. Echo awaited her in the courtyard, his posture alert yet reserved, as though bracing for whatever challenge awaited. The air held a tentative stillness, the kind that precedes a storm or a miracle. Maya's heart hammered as she steeled herself for the trial she sensed was looming beyond their fragile breakthroughs. She positioned her chair at the fence and offered Echo a soft greeting. At the sound of her voice, he lifted his head, eyes wary yet curious. Maya's internal monologue reminded her of the stakes. This encounter could either solidify their bond or shatter it entirely. She thought back to the accidents and betrayals each of them had endured. For her, it was the screech of metal and the sudden immobility that stole her autonomy. For Echo, it was the click of a chain and the hunger that hollowed him out. Both had learned to wall themselves off, instincts of self-preservation that now confronted the promise of trust. She inhaled deeply, drawing strength from memories of her first therapy session when, trembling, she lifted her legs for the first time after the surgery. That moment of triumph over pain had shown her that perseverance could rewrite her story. Echo's ears pricked as volunteers carried crates of food past his run. His stomach growled, but he did not rush. The promise of sustenance lay tainted by fear and echo of the days when he had been starved, punished for seeking comfort. Maya noticed the conflict in his body language, the tension in his shoulder blades, the way his tail twitched in fractional oscillations. She summoned the fleece blanket she kept in her lap. It had become their shared symbol of safety. Drawing the fabric through the links, she let it brush against his flank. Echo bristled, then relaxed minutely, like a tide receding before the moon's full pull. Today's test, Maya realized, would not be about treats or toys but about encountering unpredictable stimuli together. She recalled Marta's warning, true trust emerges when fear is at its peak. The path to the climax lay in facing the triggers that haunted Echo's psyche and her own. She had arranged with the shelter coordinator for a controlled introduction of a startling, noise-taped thunderstorm played through speakers beyond the fence. The thunder would simulate an unpredictable assault on Echo's senses, mirroring the sudden terrors he had known. Maya's challenge was to remain present and unwavering as those thunderclaps rolled across the courtyard. Volunteers set up the speakers discreetly behind Maya's chair. She offered a nod of thanks, her pulse quickening. Echo eyed the unfamiliar devices, nostrils flaring. Maya closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to herself, "We face this together." She opened her eyes and met Echo's gaze head-on, projecting calm even as her heart pounded. The first rumble sounded a low, rolling growl that reverberated beneath her chair. Echo flinched violently, his body tensing as though bracing for impact. Maya reached out and laid a hand flat on the fence, letting her warmth flow through the links. "I'm here," she murmured, voice unwavering. The thunder claps intensified sharp cracks that mimicked the unpredictability of storms or car crashes. Echo recoiled, barking into the void, panic surging through every muscle. Maya's back protested with a stabbing pain, but she sat upright, refusing to flinch. Her own memories surged, the flash of headlights, the blast of impact, the cruel jolt that severed her world. In that second wave of trauma, she had curled into herself, certain she would never stand again. Now, as the thunder assaulted them both, she anchored herself with a silent mantra: breathe, remain, witness. Each exhale was a tether cast too steady. Echo's storm-tossed soul. Echo pressed his body flat to the ground, ears pinned, eyes squeezed shut. His breathing was rapid, panting with terror. Maya inched her chair closer, skidding across loose gravel with deliberate slowness. She placed both hands on the fence, knuckles whitening, and spoke softly. "It's just noise. It can't hurt you." Her voice was a soft caress against the backdrop of rolling thunder. She shut her eyes and allowed a single tear to escape, acknowledging the raw pain that throbbed in her back and heart. In that pain, she found empathy, the bridge between her experience and Echo's. She imagined the young puppy he once was, chasing puddles and rainstorms, oblivious to fear. She held that memory in her mind's eye. A beacon to guide him back through terror. A particularly violent clap cantered through the space, louder and closer than before. Echo bolted upright, paws, skittering against the gravel, and dashed to the gate, scratching at the chain. Maya's breath caught. She lowered herself halfway out of the wheelchair, stretching her arms as far as they could reach. "Come back, Echo," she called, voice ragged with emotion. Her outstretched hands trembled, but she held them still, offering a safe harbor amid the chaos. The thunder receded for a heartbeat, and Echo froze, nostrils quivering as he scanned the environment. Maya held her breath, willing time to stop. Then, ever so slowly, Echo turned his head toward her. His eyes glistened with panic but also something else. Recognition. Maya felt the world narrow to the span between them, the distance of a single crate of thunder, a single fence, a single heartbeat. She spoke again, every syllable infused with compassion. "I will not leave you." Echo's body quaked, but he took a tentative step forward, paws slipping in the gravel. Maya, between her own pain and the rhythm of Echo's breathing, matching him breath for breath. With each exhale, the thunder's authority diminished, its roar drowned out by the quiet resonance of trust. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The thunder track concluded, fading into distant rumble. Echo remained rooted a few feet from Maya, breathing heavily, body trembling. Maya sank back into her wheelchair, tears streaming freely. She let her hands drop to her lap, fingers unfurling. Echo watched her, uncertainty still in his stance but tempered by relief. Maya sighed, a breath of shared release, and whispered, "You did it." Her glance at the shelter walls around them felt different now, no longer boundaries that contained fear, but guardians of hope. She imagined the day Echo would walk freely by her side, unafraid of sudden noises or unexpected movements, forging a new narrative of bravery. Behind them, volunteers stood in respectful silence, witnessing the culmination of weeks of gentle work. They exchanged quiet smiles, knowing this victory was earned at the precipice of terror. Maya wheeled herself forward until her knees gently brushed the fence, offering her shoulder instead of her hands. Echo approached, nose first, and pressed his muzzle against her jacket. Maya reached around the fence and ruffled the fur on his head, a simple gesture that still carried profound weight. Echo closed his eyes, leaning into the touch, as though closing the gap between past trauma and present safety. In that moment, Maya confronted her own final barrier, the fear that one day Echo might revert to his old ways, that his scars might close off the trust they had built. She thought of her own future, of college applications, of adaptive sports ambitions, of days when her wheelchair wheels would roll with confident ease. She allowed herself to envision a life alongside Echo, where thunderous storms would no longer trigger panic but could be weathered together. The sensation of the fence between them faded. All that remained was a shared conviction that no obstacle, physical or psychological, could sever the bond they had forged as the sun dipped lower, casting the courtyard in bronze light. Maya and Echo remained locked in an embrace of presence. The approaching climax, the ultimate test of trust, had passed. In its wake lay a new threshold, the possibility of adoption, of a life beyond these walls. But that horizon lay in the next chapter. For now, Maya whispered into Echo's fur, "We're ready for whatever comes next." Echo exhaled, a shuddering sigh of release, and nuzzled her hand one last time before settling at her side. A simulated thunderstorm thrusts a paralyzed teen and an abused dog into their greatest fear, yet through unwavering presence and mutual courage, they emerge bound by a trust that outshines any storm. Dusk had settled over the shelter courtyard, painting the chain-link fences in shades of amber and rose, when the moment of true resolution arrived. Maya sat in her wheelchair just inside Echo's enclosure, the barrier between them momentarily forgotten as she cradled the worn fleece blanket in her lap. Echo, once rigid with fear, now lay beside her, his head resting gently on her knee. The thunderstorm simulation, meant to mimic the unpredictable traumas of his past, had been the crucible in which their bond was forged. But it was what followed that transcended every expectation, a spontaneous act of compassion that, in a single gesture, erased the lines between human and dog and left onlookers breathless. A sudden, distant shout startled Echo as a volunteer misstepped beyond the fence with a crate of dinner bowls. In an instant, Echo's muscles tensed, his body coiling like a spring ready to leap away from perceived danger. Maya's heart lurched, her breath catching in her throat. She instinctively reached out to steady him, her gloved hand hovering near his shoulders, yet paused, remembering every lesson about allowing him autonomy. As Echo prepared to bolt, an unexpected impulse seized him. Instead of retreating, he shifted his weight, rolled onto his back, and stretched one paw toward Maya's hand. It was a gesture of vulnerability so profound that time seemed to slow. He offered his postcard, strong, and trembling with the same hopeful question he had once posed across the fence. "Will you still be here?" Maya's breath trembled as she placed her hand in his paw, their touch sealing a pact of mutual guardianship that went far beyond simple companionship. In that instant, all the layers of adversity, the chain that had bound Echo, the car that had immobilized Maya, the fear that had shackled both their hearts melted away. A wave of emotion crashed over the small audience of volunteers who had gathered at the periphery, silent witnesses to this extraordinary communion. Tears wetted Maya's cheeks as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Echo's, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. Echo's tail swept the gravel in slow arcs, each wag an affirmation of trust reborn. They had traversed the full arc of their struggle, initial trepidation, fractured breakthroughs, devastating setbacks, and now a moment of unguarded peace that signified true resolution. Maya's mind raced back to the early days of her rehabilitation nights of crippling pain, mornings of bitter disappointment when progress stalled. She remembered the isolation of hospital rooms, the hushed conversations between doctors speculating about permanent paralysis, the ache of longing for a life she feared she'd lost forever. In those dark moments, she had yearned for a sign that her spirit could endure. Echo's spontaneous offering of his paw, an act born of his own pain and fear, became that sign. She realized that healing was not a linear path, but a tapestry woven from countless acts of courage, some small, some grand. Their shared moment of vulnerability had become the thread that bound her own fragmented confidence back together. For Echo, the journey had been equally profound. He had arrived at the shelter, a broken soul, his spirit eroded by neglect and brutality. Each human touch had once represented potential harm, every fence a barrier between safety and suffering. Yet through Maya's unwavering presence, refusal to flinch in the face of fear, her gentle voice offering comfort through simulated storms, Echo rediscovered the fundamental truth he had lost, that kindness could be as real and sustaining as any threat. In offering his paw, Echo reclaimed his agency, choosing solidarity over instinctive flight. His gesture declared that his heart was open again, that he would step forward into a future defined not by his scars but by his capacity for trust. As the sky deepened into indigo, Marta approached with a clipboard in hand. Her eyes glistened with quiet emotion as she recorded the scene. Maya and Echo, self-appointed guardians of each other's redemption. She stepped forward and disengaged the latch of the gate, her motion deliberate and ceremonial. Without hesitation, Maya wheeled inside the enclosure, closing the distance that had long defined their interactions. Echo rose to his paws and backed into Maya's path, guiding her like a gentle shepherd. Their eyes met once more, and in that gaze lay the promise of a shared life, one in which fear might still flicker, but never rule. Maya retrieved a soft leash from her jacket pocket, one she had prepared for this very moment, and clipped it to Echo's collar. As she adjusted the clasp, Echo stood perfectly still, his head bowed in patient anticipation. Volunteers stepped back, allowing the new pair to take their first steps together beyond the fence. Maya tested her strength, wheeling forward as Echo walked beside her, his stride tentative yet steady. Each rotation of her wheels and each footfall of Echo on the gravel echoed with determination. A synchrony born of respect and resolve. They moved toward the courtyard exit as the first stars emerged overhead, the shelter's gates opening to a world that once seemed closed to them. Outside the shelter, the air felt different, open, expansive, charged with possibility. Maya paused at the gate, breathing in the scent of pine and night blossoms. Echo sat at her side, watching her with attentive eyes, no longer the fearful dog she had first encountered. Maya placed a hand on his head, feeling the warmth of his body beneath her glove. "We did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Echo leaned into her palm, his tail sweeping the ground one last time before evening settled fully. In that shared silence, they bore witness to the aftermath of their journey. Two souls once fractured by trauma now whole in companionship. A spontaneous gesture of trust, an abused dog offering his paw to a paralyzed teen, shatters the final barrier of fear, forging a bond that transcends pain and heralds a new life of shared resilience. Maya paused at the threshold of the shelter's exit, hands resting lightly on Echo's head as he sat patiently by her wheelchair. The courtyard's boundaries, once fraught with the weight of wire and fear, now felt like markers of triumph rather than confinement. She inhaled the evening air, still tinged with the scent of damp earth and the echo of distant barks, and allowed herself a long moment to reflect on how far they had come. When she first arrived, her focus had been on reclaiming a fragment of her former independence. Now, she recognized that what she had truly rediscovered was the profound power of interdependence. She and Echo had taught one another that to heal is to trust, and to trust is to open the door to hope. In the weeks since their first tentative sniffs and cautious glances, Maya had grown accustomed to mornings that began with the gentle rattle of her wheels rolling over gravel and evenings colored by the gentle thump of Echo's tail against the ground. She reflected on the arc of their journey, the shyness that kept Echo tethered to the far corner of his run, the flashbacks that threatened to erase every step forward, and the simulated thunderstorm that had become the crucible of their bond. Each obstacle had revealed a new layer of resilience in both of them: her willingness to grapple with pain, his capacity to choose vulnerability over flight. Their story, she realized, was not a linear trajectory from brokenness to wholeness, but a spiral that circled through setbacks and breakthroughs, each turn spiraling them closer to mutual understanding. Maya's thoughts drifted to the people whose compassion had scaffolded their progress: Marta's patient guidance through the shelter's routines, James's gentle coaching on canine body language, Dr. Singh's calm presence during medical checkups. Their expertise had provided the framework, but it was the quiet moments, the feel of Echo's warm fur beneath her gloved hand, the shared stillness at dusk, the soft nudge of his snout against her palm that had cemented the bond. She recognized that healing often unfolds not in grand gestures but in the accumulation of small acts of consistency and care. In that realization lay the true power of their connection to souls, each once silenced by trauma, now speaking the same language of patience and empathy. Looking ahead, Maya felt both exhilaration and sober responsibility. She imagined Echo in a home beyond the shelter walls, free to explore a world without fences, a place where his past would remain a chapter but not the story's entirety. She pictured herself teaching him new routines, navigating the parks, winding paths together, her wheelchair wheels tracing gentle arcs as Echo trotted faithfully beside her. She envisioned nights by the fireplace, his head resting on her lap as they shared quiet companionship. Yet she also acknowledged the possibility of future storms, literal thunderstorms that triggered Echo's instinctual fear. Moments when Maya's own body would rebel against the strain of travel and adventure. But now she carried confidence born of shared trials, that resilience could be summoned through a single calm touch or the steady cadence of a kind word. Maya considered the lessons their journey offered to viewers who had followed along, that healing is rarely solitary, that hope can be distilled in the smallest of gestures, and that to beings, even those divided by species, body, and history, can find solace in one another's company. She thought of the countless abandoned or abused animals still awaiting their own stories of transformation, and how each one held the potential to teach humans about forgiveness, courage, and unconditional love. In her mind's eye, she saw a ripple effect: families inspired to adopt, volunteers emboldened to show up day after day, communities rallying around the notion that empathy is the greatest gift we can offer both ourselves and others. At the same time, Maya felt a quiet call to action. She resolved to become an advocate for adaptive pet therapy, programs, initiatives that paired individuals with disabilities with shelter animals needing socialization. She imagined speaking at fundraisers, sharing Echo's story as proof that such programs not only enrich lives but, in many cases, save them. She planned to document their ongoing journey through short video updates, highlighting both triumphs and challenges to remind viewers that resilience is built in the tension between hope and hardship. Most of all, she wanted their story to serve as an open invitation, that anyone willing to extend a hand or a pin to the arena of vulnerability might discover reservoirs of strength they never knew existed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya wheeled forward, Echo rising to pad beside her. She reached to scratch behind his ears, feeling the familiar rumble of contentment vibrate through his body. For a moment, neither spoke nor moved, simply existing in the fragile perfection of shared presence. Then Maya whispered, "Let's go home," and Echo nudged her with his muzzle, as though affirming her words. They moved together through the shelter gate's one pair of wheels, one set of paws tracing the same path into the unknown promise of tomorrow. What are your hopes for Maya and Echo's journey? Comment below and share how you hope their bond continues to grow. Two hearts, once fractured by trauma, stand at a new frontier united in hope and ready to navigate life's uncertainties together, proving that trust can blossom where pain once reigned. As the twilight deepened into a velvet night, Maya and Echo settled into the cozy embrace of Maya's family living room, the soft glow of lamps casting warm halos around them. Echo lay at her feet on a plush dog bed, his breathing slow and steady, the steady rhythm a testament to the unbreakable bond they'd forged. Maya took a moment to survey the scene. Photographs of their journey lined the mantel. Maya in her wheelchair offering Echo the first piece of fleece. Echo, paw extended, offering an unspoken vow of trust. The two of them side by side at the shelter gate, poised to step into a shared future. Each image served as a milestone in their shared narrative, a visual ledger of progress born from vulnerability and compassion. Now, in the gentle quiet of home, their story invited a broader community to join in the work of healing for themselves, for countless other animals, and for the humans who love them. In the days that followed, Maya found herself channeling the momentum of their breakthrough into concrete action. She partnered with the shelter to launch an adaptive pet therapy program, recruiting individuals with disabilities who craved companionship and offering them the chance to socialize dogs in need of gentle exposure to human kindness. Volunteers received training in reading canine body language, managing stress responses, and fostering mutual trust through nonverbal cues and consistent care. Echo became the program's ambassador, guides demonstrating how a single calm presence can transform a trembling rescue into a willing friend. Through social media posts, community newsletters, and local news features, Maya shared stories of participants whose lives brightened as they navigated obstacles together, proving that empathy is a two-way street, benefiting both animal and human alike. Recognizing that financial barriers often constrain shelters' capacity to provide specialized training and accessibility adaptations, Maya spearheaded a fundraiser called Wheels and Wags. The event brought wheelchair moves and dog demos to the town park, inviting community members to sponsor laps, each dollar raised going toward agility course, modifications for dogs with physical limitations, and custom ramps to accommodate handlers with mobility challenges. Local businesses donated prizes, gift certificates from pet supply stores, adaptive sports equipment, and professional photography sessions to capture families with their adopted pets. The turnout exceeded all expectations. Neighbors, friends, and strangers alike lined the course, cheering as wheelchair-bound participants and their four-legged partners navigated obstacles side by side. The success of Wheels and Wags not only generated vital funds but also ignited a sense of collective responsibility, showing that inclusion and compassion flourish when a community rallies behind a shared vision. Beyond monetary support, Maya encouraged supporters to contribute in other meaningful ways, by fostering dogs who needed transitional homes, donating time to walk and socialize animals, and sharing their own animal-inspired stories to spread awareness. She created an online story circle where anyone could post about the moment an animal taught them resilience, hope, or forgiveness. Stories poured in: a veteran who reclaimed purpose-walking rescue dogs, a child whose confidence bloomed after training a shy cat, a senior citizen whose loneliness eased through volunteer shifts at a wildlife rehabilitation center. Each narrative became a testament to the universal language of empathy, illustrating that when we lift another being out of fear, we lift ourselves as well. Maya curated these stories into a digital anthology, Paws of Promise, and pledged all proceeds from its sale to expand adaptive pet therapy programs nationwide. As word of their efforts spread, Maya and Echo were invited to speak at conferences on disability advocacy and animal welfare. Together, they demonstrated how simple adjustments like lowered water bowls, accessible play yards, and elasticide-adjusted leashes could transform shelter life for animals with special needs and their human partners. Echo, ever the gentle teacher, showcased how a single paw lift could bridge fear and trust, how slow approach and patient persistence could coax an abused animal into shared joy. Maya spoke of her own transformation, how the tactile reassurance of Echo's fur beneath her gloved hand had restored her sense of agency, how guiding him through mock storms had reawakened her courage to face each day's uncertainties. Their joint presentations inspired policy changes in several shelters, prompting administrators to adopt inclusive practices and prioritize rehabilitation over quick turnover. Meanwhile, Maya chronicled their ongoing journey in a video series, titled Chronicles of Courage, documenting daily routines, breakthrough moments, and candid reflections on days when progress felt elusive. Viewers witnessed Echo mastering veterinarian visits without panic, Maya navigating outdoor trails with adaptive equipment, and the two of them sharing quiet evenings of mutual comfort. The transparency of vulnerability. Maya's accounts of pain, upsets, Echo's relapse into fear at sudden noises reminded audiences that healing is neither linear nor confined to moments of triumph. Rather, it is a tapestry woven from adversity and resilience, where each thread, no matter how frayed, contributes to the whole. Comments flooded in with support, personal anecdotes, and expressions of hope, forging an online community united by a shared belief in the redemptive power of compassion. As Maya wheeled through her daily routine, Echo now trotting faithfully at her side, she carried in her heart a lesson more profound than any she had learned in hospitals or therapy sessions: that true freedom arises not from unbroken bodies but from hearts unchained by fear. Their journey from cautious introductions at a shelter fence to in hand steps into a larger world became a living testament to what can unfold when two beings extend patience, empathy, and unwavering presence to one another. In every sniff, every tentative step forward, and every shared sigh of relief, Maya and Echo discovered that the boundaries separating us, whether physical, emotional, or experiential, can be transcended through simple acts of trust. To those inspired by their story, Maya offers an open invitation: visit your local shelter. Volunteer a few hours, or even just leave a bowl of water for a stray. Share your own animal-inspired moments on social media with the hashtag Pause of Promise. And consider supporting organizations that champion inclusive, adaptive programs for humans and animals alike. The ripple effect of a single compassionate gesture can extend far beyond one life. It can reshape a community's understanding of resilience, interdependence, and hope. To lives forever, altered a paralyzed teen and an abused dog stand as living proof that when compassion crosses the divide of fear, it seeds a harvest of shared strength and boundless hope.